Hi, everybody. This is Maya Zahira with Psychic Protection Sanctuary. And let's dive right in. Today's topic is the 3 types of abusive spiritual healers and teachers. The 3 types of abusive spiritual healers or teachers. Now, I have a question for you. Have you ever had an encounter? And those of you who are here live, you can even answer this in the chat if you feel inclined. And if you're watching this on the replay somewhere, you can answer this question wherever you're watching the replay. Have you ever had an encounter with a spiritual healer, teacher, light worker, mentor, etc., who seemed to be abusive, predatory, or at the very least, really dysfunctional and toxic? Okay, so think about that. And I worded it this way on purpose. Have you ever had an encounter with a spiritual helper who seemed to be? Because a lot of times when we have encounters that aren't quite right with people in helping professions, we're not quite sure, like, was that behavior okay? Or am I, like, we start to second guess ourselves. We're not really sure if it was inappropriate behavior or not. And a lot of times there's gaslighting involved. The person is telling us that we're wrong or we're crazy or our expectations are messed up. And so let's have a conversation about this, okay? All right, so as always, I have a lot of notes, so bear with me as I keep glancing downward to make sure that I stay on my bullet points, because I have 3 pages of notes to go over with you. And always, as always, this is hilarious. I have 3 pairs of glasses for close-up and I'm going to be reading out of my book. And then I have my blue light blocking glasses. So to read the comments, I have to put on my big fat glasses here, and we've got a comment in the chat. Rose from Texas says yes to my question. A Reiki teacher was very toxic with her. Yeah. And some people have had negative experiences with Reiki teachers, but that's just one category of light workers. There's so many different possibilities. So let's go even further. And if you are here live and you still want to make a comment, you still can. I'll read it in just a minute, but I'm going to go on. Okay, got to read my notes here. Okay, so once again, the title of this class today is the 3 types of abusive spiritual healers or teachers. And the reason why I'm teaching this class today is because my 3rd book is coming out next Monday from this date that we're recording this Zoom on. So today's date is August 5th, 2024. Next week, August 12th, 2024, we are launching this book, and you can get it on Amazon. And the book is called I don't know if it's going to show up reverse for you guys, but it's The Dark Side of Spiritual Healers, Teachers, and Lightworkers. And then the subtitle is Abusive, Predatory, and Supernatural Behaviors Behind the Facade of Love and Light. And it says not for resale on here because this is my sample book that I wanted to preview and make sure that everything was good and ready to go. And I have 3 tabs here because I'm going to be reading 3 little short example stories to you as we go through the 3 types of abusive spiritual healers and teachers. Now, just to let you know, this book is about way more than just the 3 types that I'm going to teach you about today, but that is one area of the book that I cover. Okay. So once again, hi, everybody. My name's Maya Zahira with psychicprotectionsanctuary.com. Just the shortest possible little announcements before we go on. We are now live in Zoom for a special free class that we do every month, especially for the members of our free Facebook group. And if you're not already a member of the free Facebook group, it is called Psychic Protection Sanctuary Facebook group. And we do vet the members. So if you have like a shady profile on Facebook, we're not going to let you in. You do have to answer the 3 questions so that we know that you're a real person and not a robot. And it is the group is a wonderful safe space where we have little daily discussions, and we have this free class once a month. I do intend to keep offering this free class. This free class, it's actually the main way that people find me. The main way that people decide to sign up for my program is through the monthly free class. So I intend to keep doing it. And also, these free classes, I end up using them later. I turn them into transcripts, and this is what turns into my books later. So there's definitely purpose behind these free classes, and you all get to benefit from them. So that's super exciting. Also, those of you who are here live, just to remind you that even though we have this special group that is here live, later I will take this recording and I will upload it onto YouTube, where it will be public. And I love YouTube, mostly. Mostly. I love YouTube because that's where a lot of people find my channel, and then they binge watch all the videos. But if I'm not putting out any new videos, then YouTube stops. Like, I go down and the algorithm changes, and YouTube stops showing me to people. So we got to keep free stuff coming every month. Yes. Okay. So let's do, for those of you who are here live, where are you joining from? Let's do some shout outs. And I am here about an hour from Tucson. And I actually moved out here almost 5 years ago. I lived in the Kansas City area and surrounding areas, within a couple of hours of Kansas City for over 30 years, until I finally moved somewhere warmer and usually drier, although we're in the monsoon season now in Arizona. So that's where I am at on the planet. And I'm just thrilled that we have people all over the world. So we have kind of a quiet group tonight. That's totally okay, because I know there's going to be a lot of people watching the replay. So if you're watching the replay, go ahead and tell us where you're from in the comments, wherever you're at, whatever social media you're on. I would love to see where you're from. I just love technology nowadays, about how we can reach out and connect with people all over the world. Okay. So I'm going to switch this up. Maybe not. Keep these on. So today's topic, the 3 types of abusive spiritual healers, teachers, mentors, etc., light workers. How do I know so much about this? Like, why should you listen to what I have to say about this subject? So I'm going to just really briefly share this with you, and then we'll get into our 1, 2, 3 categories of abusive light workers, so that you can more easily identify them and avoid them, because you don't want to be around people like that. So how do I know about this? Well, currently I am at age 51, and I've been a spiritual teacher in various capacities for a little over 30 years. So that's a long time. And during that time, I have witnessed and experienced. So I have witnessed and personally experienced a lot. So as I have attended as a student classes and events put on by my mentors, observing and experiencing abuses and atrocities and like major toxic stuff, attending and being a part of spiritual events put on in not only Kansas City and Tucson area, Phoenix area, but also when I lived in Kansas City, I toured around the Midwest. So a lot of the stories that I tell in the book, I mean, they're really, you know, they could be like any town USA, really. So I've seen a lot of toxicities in the spiritual world. And in the past 10 years, when I started specifically narrowing down my spiritual practice and working primarily with issues of psychic protection, psychic people dealing with psychic attack, entity issues, black magic, all the negative energy stuff, I was very surprised to start attracting a lot of people, a lot of clients who needed assistance with extracting themselves from relationships with abusive, toxic, and sometimes even dangerous spiritual teachers and healers. And prior to that, I was aware of some abuse issues, but mainly the troubling things that I saw was around the sexual abuse. So practitioners not having professional boundaries and having sex with their clients, which we're going to talk about that. That's one of our categories. But I really did not know that much about some of these other abuses. And through working with clients over the last 10 years, I became privy to a lot of stories of like just frankly situations that seem unbelievable. But now I know that it's very commonplace. So, for example, spiritual teachers doing black magic on their clients. I mean, just crazy, crazy stuff. So I've worked with a lot of people over the years, a lot of clients and students trying to escape from abusive light workers. Light workers is kind of an umbrella term that I'm using to refer to a spiritual healer, someone who does energy work, or a spiritual teacher, or a spiritual mentor, a spiritual thought leader, all those kinds of people. Okay. Now, does this mean that every spiritual healer, it doesn't mean that every spiritual teacher and healer out there is abusive. I think you've got common sense. You know that that's not what I'm saying, but I will say that in the last 10 years in my practice, especially 10 years ago, when all of a sudden there was this influx of people coming, when I was still in Kansas City, I just could not believe all of a sudden all these people were coming to me and they were trying to escape from all these different people who were in Kansas City, all these different abusers, different kinds of abusers, not just men, not just sexual predators, but people doing awful things to their students, to their clients, all genders, so not just men. But again, this is not just Kansas City, but we can just refer to any town USA. These issues are happening. Okay, so let me get a drink. And then if you are a note taker, I encourage you to get your pen and paper because I'm going to go over the 3 types of abusive spiritual healers and teachers next. Now, when you're first learning about this, because you could be very new to this subject or you could be very seasoned, unfortunately. You could have had a lot of bad experiences, unfortunately, and then you would know a lot about this. But if this is all new to you, it can be difficult to figure out, okay, what is abuse or what is just a student not agreeing with their mentor. You know, that's not abuse. Like if they're on a different wavelength, maybe they're not compatible or they have different goals or something like that. So just FYI, there is a whole chapter at the beginning of the book, The Dark Side of Spiritual Healers, that is about red flags and green flags And so that is an in-depth list to help you understand what are the positives that you should be looking for in a spiritual teacher, healer, and what are some things that wouldn't be considered abuse, like a spiritual teacher who maybe speaks out about things that are controversial. That doesn't mean that that teacher is a predator. Just means that not everyone agrees with what they say. You see what I mean about figuring out the discernment? Because when you're first starting out with discerning these abuses, it can be easy to kind of lump everything into abuse. So when you get the book, make sure that you take a look at that first chapter with the red flags and the green flags, just to kind of help you see what's not abuse and what is. I'm losing my throat from a lot of teaching today, losing my voice as I'm clearing my throat. Okay, number one category of the 3 types of abusive spiritual healers and teachers. I'm going to go from least serious to most serious and dangerous, but make no mistake, all 3 of these are not good. Okay, so we don't want to downplay this first category because it can still, this first category of abuser can still cause a lot of harm. Okay. So I made some notes in my notebook with a few bullet points. This, I'm going to cover some of the things that I cover in my book, but not all. So the first category is the mental / emotional abuser. The mental emotional abuser. This is the least dangerous of the 3 categories, but they can still be quite harmful. This is someone who is mentally or emotionally or verbally abusing their clients, their students, and they might be aware that they're doing it. They know full well what they're doing, and they're doing it on purpose because they want to have control, or they want to have, they want to, it's mostly about control. Or there are those that are unaware. And this might seem hard to believe, but there are a lot of spiritual teachers out there that haven't done their inner work. We call it shadow work. They haven't worked on the unhealed wounds within themselves. And so they are unaware that they are just, they've got this gathering of students around them, and they're just like playing out all of their wounds, and they're abusing people mentally, emotionally, verbally, etc., through their behaviors, and they don't even know what they're doing. Okay, so there are those that are aware, totally know what they're doing, and those that are totally unaware. By the way, those of you who are here live, if you have any questions or you want to add anything, like, hey, I had an experience with this type of person. If you want to share your story, I'm happy to read it. So feel free to use the chat option as much as you want, or not. It's totally okay. All right. So let's talk about the, okay, let me just recap those that are unaware that they are abusers. They are just simply not very self-aware people. There are people that just they don't even understand themselves very well. They have not done the inner work. They are vomiting their unhealed wounds onto their students or their followers. Those that are aware of the fact that they are abusing their followers, they know they are taking advantage or causing damage, and they don't care. These are people who might be a sociopath, a psychopath, a narcissist, or one of the other behavior disorders. And so they don't have, excuse me, they don't have empathy. They are just doing it for fame, for power, or for some other reason, and they really don't care. So here are some of the common violations that can be done by someone who fits the category of mental or emotional abuser. Okay, so these are just some of the things in the book. I wanted to cover kind of the high points, but to get the whole list, you will need to get the book, The Dark Side of Spiritual Healers. Okay, so mental emotional abuser who is a spiritual healer, spiritual teacher, etc. They might be passive aggressive or just outright aggressive, verbally aggressive, or even physically aggressive, but mostly it's verbal jabs or yelling. I've actually seen spiritual teachers who are like hollering, bellowing, yelling at their students, and the students and the followers are like, "Well, he doesn't mean it. He's dealing with a lot." No, that is not okay. It's not okay. All right. Other qualities might be manipulation, gaslighting, lies. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, and you can get more details in depth in the book. The healer or teacher might be very codependent, so they're way too involved in fixing their clients. This is a tricky one because they might come across as very altruistic and like, oh, I'm trying to help all these people. But it's actually very toxic because they're very energetically and emotionally enmeshed with all of their people, and they're intentionally creating dependency and even encouraging it so that their students or their followers need them, and they're not doing things to try to create independency. This toxic spiritual teacher might spread rumors, gossip. They might be jealous and competitive of their colleagues, or they get jealous and competitive of their followers. So anybody who is rising up and growing and really shining bright, they will squash that person down because they will get jealous of their follower who is succeeding. They might engage in something that I call word salad. Word salad, the spiritual word salad is where they're using all these flowery words, this flowery spiritual message. But if you really listen to what they're saying, it doesn't even mean anything. It's a bunch of nonsense words, but it sounds really evolved and really important. And it's intended to impress people. They will have a persona or even say that they will claim to be highly evolved. Or I've actually met spiritual teachers who were really major abusers who claimed that they were, quote, awakened. They were spiritually awakened. So they were like walking around like, everything is love. Everything is love. And they were hugging everyone. And then they were doing all sorts of abuses. And it was all this facade so that they could get away with what they were doing. Emotional, mental, emotional abuser is someone who might engage in revenge or retaliation. So let's say if you start to speak up about the abuses, watch out, there's going to be retaliation. Or if you try to stop working with them as a client, they're going to retaliate by doing whatever, throwing you under the bus, spreading rumors about you, etc. Here's another tricky one. The mental emotional abuser has a lack of boundaries and a lack of professional boundaries. So boundaries in general, they're like not even acknowledging people's personal consent. But professional boundaries would have to do with like, a spiritual teacher or healer shouldn't be just hanging out with all of their clients and acting like their clients are their buddies. There should be a professional, just a distinction in what the roles are, because otherwise that's where abuses start. And it's really important to keep that in check. And then speaking of boundaries, the mental emotional abuser will tend to violate boundaries. So they not only don't uphold their own boundaries. They don't have their own boundaries. But if anyone tries to set a boundary with them, they will violate it, or they'll get offended and they'll just step all over the boundary. So we've got, I think, a comment here. And then I'm going to read a short story to you. And I'm also open to any questions when we're here live. I don't tend to answer very many questions in the on the YouTube channel. I'm sorry about that, but it's just kind of a boundary that I've set on my time, is that I do answer lots of questions for the students in my paid academy. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But you're welcome to post questions in the anywhere. And if I'm able to answer, I will. But here in the live, I will definitely address your questions. So if you have a comment or question, feel free to include it. Anon says, I have come across the quote word salad before. Hard to tell what the teacher is saying. Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of word salad stuff out there. The word salad itself, the like fancy spiritual jargon, doesn't necessarily always mean that the person is an abuser. But it definitely means that they're not grounded at the very least. They're in spiritual la la land. They need to come back down, speak in normal words, and stop trying to be something that they're not. And the word salad is a red flag, though, because it's one of those, there are verbal and personality aspects where the spiritual teacher is trying to put on a persona of being ultra spiritual. And we have to ask, like, why are they trying to be ultra spiritual? Usually when someone is trying to put out a persona of being ultra spiritual, it's because they're actually hiding their authentic self. And what is it about their authentic self are they trying to hide? You got to ask yourself that question. Thank you, Anon. Okay, so the stories that I chose are very short. And in my book, I have lots of different stories peppered in. These are all composite stories, meaning that I've never shared any private client information, but I've worked with so many people over the years that there are common patterns. So it was very easy for me to be like, okay, I'm going to put these like 8 people's stories together loosely into this pattern of a story. Or maybe I have observed certain things personally, and then I've taken those patterns and shared them. So that's just a little FYI about the stories that I'll read today. Okay, this is in the chapter on mental and emotional abuser. And keep in mind, this is just one example. There are so many different stories, different things that I've observed, maybe different types of people that you've observed as well. So here's one example. The rage tornado trying to save the world. Tony became a spiritual teacher because she had experienced devastating levels of abuse as a child, and this drove her to feel such a strong conviction to help others in need. From a young age, she had experienced extreme, ongoing sexual abuse at the hands of her parents and various other adults, and her heartbreaking life had also included daily mental torture, physical abuse, and unspeakable atrocities. The circumstances she lived through were extreme, and it was truly amazing that she had not only survived it all, but that she was trying to help other people who were hurting. Unfortunately, though, her own psyche was so fractured that she could not see or understand her own behaviors. She was driven by her impulse to be a spiritual teacher, but it was her own unhealed trauma that was creating this sense of distorted purpose. The foundation of her work was a codependent need to not only fix, but also control her followers. Toni would often go into fits of rage as she screamed at any students who stood up to her or questioned her in any way. Quote, "I will help heal thousands and thousands of hurting people in the world," she would bellow. "No one is going to stop me. I did not go through my abuse for nothing. I am here to heal people." If Toni felt threatened by you, watch out. She would spread lies to the rest of the group to cause any free thinkers or self-empowered individuals to be shunned by the others. One moment she would be lashing out at someone with biting put-downs or hollering accusations, and the next minute she would stand with open arms, giving her acolytes energy healing and gentle words of supposed wisdom. And this story is literally based on observations that I made of people in my world. So I've actually known people like this. This is an example of someone who did not know that they were an abuser. They were just so unaware and so unhealed, and they were just spewing it onto people. And it was really creating a mess for the people that she was trying to help. Okay, so next, because we're going through the 3 types of abusive spiritual healers teachers, number 2 is the sexual predator. Sexual predator. This is probably the most commonly known. Most people that I've talked to, when I ask them what they know about predators in the spiritual communities, they say, "Oh, you mean like sexual predators?" So this is usually the first thing that people think of. It is very damaging to our communities and to the people, the individuals who are harmed. So just to be 10,000% clear, yes, human beings on the planet have sex. Sex is a healthy thing that human beings do. That said, people in a helping profession, whether it's an energy healer, massage therapist, spiritual teacher, guru, yoga teacher, even like going outside of the new age field, going into other categories, other people in helping professions, like a pastor at a church, or a priest, or your lawyer, or your therapist. Okay, none of those people in helping professions should be having sex with their clients and followers. Okay, it's you. So the people in the helping professions should be setting those professional boundaries. And many of them are not. They're taking advantage of their position. They are in a position of power. Whether you want to believe it or not, they're in a position of power over, at least in some degree, over their client or their follower. And so it is up to the helping professional to set the boundary. Oftentimes they don't. And so in their position of power, they end up abusing that position of power. And they have some desire to do whatever the heck they want. They don't worry about the professional boundaries. To be super clear, this type of abuser can be any gender. Okay. We often think of it as being the male spiritual teacher and the female follower. And yes, in my observation, that does tend to be the most common, but it is not the only thing. I've actually observed female spiritual teachers who were definitely sexual predators, and they had very inappropriate sexual boundaries with women and men, and everybody, all humans, in their classes. It was like easily observable, the inappropriate touching and everything, in Reiki classes and things like that. So this can happen all across the board, any genders. So we're definitely not male bashing. There's none of that going on. We're saying that any human being can be a sexual predator, and it does happen. Get a drink. The most common approach with the sexual predator is just so asinine and common. But most of the time, from what I've seen, a lot of the victims are young women, okay, that are very naive and impressionable, and they're really looking up to their spiritual mentor, who's usually an older male. And the older male will say, well, oh, you're so special, lots of grooming. Oh, you're so special. You have this special spiritual light, but your sacral chakra is blocked. Your sexual chakra is blocked. But I can help you with that. We can have sex, and I can heal that for you by having sex with you. So again, it sounds ridiculous when we say it out loud here. But if you can imagine being a 17-year-old young woman, 18-year-old young woman, 19, 20, or whatever, and you're just totally fascinated by this older guru, and for whatever reason, you're drawn in. And also keep in mind, there is a ton of mental manipulation. So there's almost always there's a crossover. I'm doing these 3 categories to help you understand, but rarely is anybody, I don't think ever is anybody one of these categories only. Because, for example, the sexual predator is doing tons of mental and emotional abuse. There's so much mental manipulation, brainwashing, grooming, trying to get the person to trust them. And it's just awful. It's just awful. So one of the approaches of the sexual predator is increasing boundary violations. So it might start off with an inappropriate touch, a brief touch, or a hug that lasts a little bit too long. And then they just keep pushing the boundaries a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. And that's one of the ways that they manipulate to get in the door. And here's a really important thing that I'm going to point out before I read the story about the sexual predator. The issue of consent. So usually the sexual predator, the common pattern is that they do end up acquiring what we might call consent from their target, but it's not really consent, okay? Because the consent is acquired through loads and loads and loads of mental and emotional abuse and manipulation, brainwashing, grooming, etc., to get the targeted person, to get the victim to consent and say yes, or maybe even to get the person to think that they are initiating sex, okay? So it's very insidious, the level of like planning and mental gymnastics that the perpetrator does to figure out how to get consent. Because yes, there are cases of rape where there is absolutely no consent given. But a lot of these sexual predators are too smart for that, because they're not, they know that that's too risky for them. So they'll find ways to obtain consent through all of these manipulation tactics. But let's be super clear. that consent that is obtained through manipulation is not true consent. So if you're watching this and you are someone who was abused and manipulated and gaslit and groomed into trusting a spiritual mentor to where you consented to having a sexual relationship with them, just know that that's not real consent. You didn't give real, actual consent. A lot of people will blame themselves and say, well, I said yes, I gave consent. When you're under mind control, brainwashing, manipulation, that's not true consent. So let's be really clear about that. Okay, page 81. So the story that I'm going to share is a minor one. The other stories that I have are longer, that are really yucky. So I'm going to read the really short one, just to illustrate that there's a whole spectrum of sexual abuse by spiritual healers, mentors, etc. So on this end of the spectrum, we have the predator engaged in absolutely non-consensual sex, which is rape. And then we have over here, we have the sexual boundary violations and manipulation. Okay. And all of it is abuse. So I'm going to read you a story about something like a situation that would be very typical in spiritual communities, where there are sexual boundary violations, and then the person who speaks up is shamed. And this is something that happened to me. The mentor who had other ideas. When I was in my 20s, I was a new member in a circle for esoteric studies. The leader of the group, a man 30 years my senior, chose me to be his new assistant for rituals. And thus, I would need to go through rigorous training and mentoring with him. During one of our first group ceremonies together, we had to go to the back room to fetch a particular book. While we were alone, he pulled me close to him and kissed me on the mouth. It happened so quickly, I did not have a chance to figure out how to respond. We rejoined the rest of the group and finished the meeting. After everyone had disappeared, I stayed after to speak with the group leader and tell him I was uncomfortable with what had happened. He responded curtly, telling me that he was no longer interested in training me for the special position. The next day, I sent out a message to the rest of the group to voice my concerns. The group response was shocking to me. They all defended the Grand Master and shamed me for speaking out against him. I lost all trust in that group and I never went back. So like, I literally said, hey, I wasn't comfortable with you kissing me. And he's like, no, I don't want to work with you anymore. I'm not going to train you for that special position. What a jerk, man. But that's so common. And that's just a subtle, like, quote, minor situation. There are things that are so much worse. And I live outside of Tucson currently, as I mentioned before, and there are situations going on in Tucson where people in spiritual and other types of leadership roles are manipulating their students or staff, employees, etc., into having sexual relationships and telling them like, well, I know you have all this trauma, but I can help you heal from it. And so, if we have a sexual relationship, then that will help you heal from your trauma. I call bullshit on that. Bullshit. Yep. Okay. Are y'all ready for number 3 on the list? Number three is the creepiest one and the most dangerous. But before we get into the third type of abusive spiritual healer or teacher, let's just take a second. Okay, so if you are someone who is really curious about learning more about psychic protection, or if you are wanting to learn more about false light entities, learning the truth about all of the fake spirit guides and channeled messages and how you can be more discerning with your own spiritual work, or if you are dealing with your own issues of psychic attack, entity issues, black magic, psychic protection issues of any kind, then I encourage you to check out my 12-month academy. This is the only way that you can work with me directly on an ongoing basis through daily mentoring and being a part of my group program. It's called Spiritual Empowerment Academy. And you can find information about it on my website, www.psychicprotectionsanctuary.com, and click on Work with Maya. And there's a ton of information on what is included in the academy. And it is an amazing program. And the current members will tell you that it is an amazing program. Beautiful group of people in there. Okay, let's get into number 3 type of abusive spiritual healer or teacher. This is the dark healer or the dark shaman. I used to call this category the dark shaman. And then over time I thought about it and I was like, it ain't just shamans that are doing this. So I'm going to say the dark healer, because I've met all different types of spiritual workers, not just shamans, but yes, there are dark shamans. There are dark Reiki healers. There are dark supposed angel channelers who aren't working with angels, by the way. They're working with other stuff. But, every type of healer, quote, healer that you can imagine, there are people utilizing it in a dark way. So if you're like, what? How can that be? Hear me out. Now, remember, I've spent the last 10 years working with people who have been through the most horrific situations imaginable. It was the issues of people trying to escape from dark healers that was the most shocking to me when I was still living in Kansas City, and there were all these people coming to me trying to escape from local dark healers. And I was just like, oh my God, this is so disturbing. But now that I've moved and I've also expanded and I've worked with people all over the world, I can tell you this issue is not just in the Midwest, it's everywhere. So the dark healer is the most dangerous and the most insidious. Their intent is to gain control over the client or to gain spiritual power. So the mental and emotional abuser, the first one, their intention is usually for fame and money and power and that sort of thing. And yes, there can be some of that with the dark healer, but usually it's the deeper intent with the dark healer. They want spiritual power. They want to be able to feed off of other people's spiritual energy, life force energy, so that they can cultivate more of their own power. Okay. But it can also, like I said, it can also mix in with wanting fame, wanting personal power, etc. So let's talk about the obvious dark healer versus the not obvious dark healer. The obvious dark healer is someone who posts on their website or on their storefront that they are a practitioner of black magic. Okay. So personally, I believe in freedom. So I'm not the energy police. I'm not going to knock on someone's storefront and say, you need to stop doing black magic. That would be kind of dumb. Like I can't, that's not what I'm supposed to do here on the planet. But across the board, every client that I've worked with who's come to me who they hired a practitioner of black magic, whether they hired them from online or from a local storefront. They hired this occult practitioner who practices the dark arts because a lot of times the client hired that occult practitioner because they were under psychic attack. They themselves were under psychic attack. Somebody was doing something bad to them. And so they thought, well, this practitioner of the dark arts should know how to help me because they know about the dark arts. Well, unfortunately, like I was saying before, across the board, every client who has ever come to me who has hired a practitioner of the dark arts, black magic, any flavor, there's so many flavors of it, they have always come under attack by the practitioner. So they went to the dark practitioner to try to get help because their cousin so-and-so was psychically attacking them. And then eventually the dark magician, they have a practice where they end up attacking their own clients. And it sounds weird, but it's a whole different mentality where they want to trap their clients into giving them more and more and more money, to where the client doesn't understand that the practitioner is the one psychically attacking them. So they actually came in the door saying, I want you to help me with this person who's psychically attacking me. The dark magician says, okay, I can help you with that. And then the dark magician starts blasting the client later with black magic. So the person initially had some minor issues, and now they have issues that are 10 times worse. And so just FYI, I don't recommend, if you're dealing with black magic from some source, I don't recommend that you hire a black magic practitioner, because for some reason, like all of that, well, it has to do with their ethics. If they are okay with doing black magic against certain people, they're also okay with doing it against their own clients, unfortunately. At least that's what I've seen over and over again. I've never seen an example of someone who didn't just freely attack everybody. So this is the example of the obvious dark healer, is someone who is advertising, excuse me, this is someone who's advertising that they do black magic, and you know it, you can tell from their advertising and from their presence. Sorry guys, allergy season. That's why my throat is scratchy. So that's the obvious dark healer. And then the not obvious, I think, is even more creepy and disturbing. And this is what I saw lots of examples of in my own practice working with clients who were coming to me with major emergencies. The not obvious dark healer is someone who puts themselves forth as a Reiki master, as an angel healer, as a channeler of 5D ascension messages from the aliens, or whatever, like all this stuff that's supposed to be uplifting. No, I want to just say, I have practiced Reiki for 25 years. I'm definitely not anti-Reiki. I do self-Reiki every day. It's like so interwoven into my life. I don't even think about it. I go to sleep at night, I'm automatically doing Reiki on myself, do Reiki on my pets. I think Reiki itself is a great thing, but we're not talking about Reiki being a bad thing. We're talking about practitioners that are not working from a good place. Okay. So we've got practitioners who are utilizing whatever love and light version, like this, like glamour of love and light, energy healing method, or whatever, spiritual teaching, spiritual approach, they're putting that forth as a glamour, as like, oh, sparkles, it's all loving. Reiki can do no harm. Well, Reiki itself can do no harm, but someone who's calling themselves a Reiki master who is intent in plugging in energy cords into their clients and feeding off of their life force energy, that can do harm. Absolutely. So Reiki itself is neutral. Okay. Reiki itself is energy. It's life force energy. It doesn't harm anyone, but people can come along and do and manipulate energy in whatever way they wish. So absolutely, there are way too many practitioners who are putting themselves forth as love and light practitioners. And meanwhile, they are doing all sorts of dark things, whether it's plugging in energy cords and siphoning life force energy, or I've known several who a really common thing is to call themselves an angel guide or an angel healer or an angel channeler, angel, whatever. I also love angels. I'm not anti-angel. I personally love angels, but it's very popular for people to call themselves an angel healer, angel channeler. And meanwhile, they are working with demons, black magic, doing all sorts of horrible things to their clients. And I don't have time to read all the stories to you, but there are some rather lengthy, I think kind of freaky, like unbelievable stories of things that have happened to people with this type of dark healer. So in fact, the introduction of the book starts off with a composite story of the non-obvious dark healer. And I think you'll find it very interesting. So what's also interesting about the dark healer is that they will psychically attack their clients. They will they will psychically attack them to cause nightmares, illnesses, life challenges, paranormal situations. As I mentioned a couple of times already, they will do things in order to steal the person's life force energy and weaken them so that the practitioner themselves obtains more energy. They will send negative entities to the person to harass the person. Another thing that they will do is what I call non-consensual telepathy. A lot of you know what telepathy is. That's sending thoughts through your mind or mind reading. So sending thoughts, non-consensual. So this is something I've seen a lot. A lot of my clients who were trying to get away from dark healers is that the dark healer would be sending telepathically horrible abusive thoughts into the victim's mind, like 24/7. Okay. And then also non-consensual astral sex. This is going to sound really weird to people who don't know much about the deeper aspects of spiritual practices, but there are plenty of people who can astral travel. There's nothing wrong with astral traveling. Well, I personally don't recommend it to my clients who are dealing with psychic protection issues, because when you leave your body, that can be problematic. But I'm not anti-astral travel. Astral travel is not abusive. Okay. It's not the safest thing, but it's not abusive. But astral traveling to a person without consent, astral traveling to your client and messing with their energy, or astral traveling to them and having sex with them on the astral plane, not okay. Totally wrong. Bad. Don't do it. The dark healer can also attach energy cords, astral implants, or other foreign spiritual objects into the person's energy field. So it gets like really weird and creepy and like, does this stuff even exist kind of question going through your mind. And absolutely. So if there's anybody who's watching this video who's like, what is all this stuff that she's talking about? Energy cords, astral implants, astral travel, sex, all da 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 da. you need to binge watch my entire YouTube channel, okay? Because most of what I work with is the spiritual and psychic attack um, types of issues where people are dealing with boundary violations upon their energy. Okay, so you'll learn a lot and then also you'll learn a lot if you read my second book, The Psychic Attack Sourcebook, which you can get off of Amazon. So if all of this dark healer stuff is like really foreign to you, you can learn more, the more rounded out information from those other sources. Okay, so now I'm going to read to you a story that is also a very minor version of a dark healer. And then if you want to read the more extreme stories, you'll have to read my book, The Dark Side of Spiritual Healers. But I want to just illustrate really that there are so many subtle abuses that happen within the spiritual field that we're not even really sure if it's abuse. So this will be a good example, this story, but I want to read this comment first. Yes. This commenter says, any tool can be used for good or harm, just as physical tools. I love that you said that. And I want to also add that it is my belief that this also goes for different kinds of religions. So I have seen people use magic in harmful ways, and I have seen people who claim to be Christian saying prayers that are actually curses against people. So that's an example of like two different kind of what might be seen as opposites in the religion spectrum. And a lot of people will assume that, oh, witchcraft is evil and that's all black magic. No, I have seen people of every religion use their religious practices for good. And I've seen people of every religion, I've seen other people use their religious practices. I just lost track of my thought. I've seen many people use their religious practices for good, and other people use their religious practices for evil. And so your comment reminded me to point that out, that we're definitely, I know I was talking about like occult practitioners. There was one review on one of my books where the gentleman was saying that I'm anti-occult, and I'm actually not. I really am not against occult practices, magical practices. Absolutely not. No, the people in my academy, for example, we've got people all across the board, all different faiths, but I don't have anybody in there who is doing spiritual practices in order to harm others. I won't allow people who are trying to impose on other people's will by using prayers or magic or occult practices or whatever. That's my line that I don't cross. So occult practices, awesome. Imposing on people's free will or sending like demons to hurt people, like, that's not good. That's my opinion. Not everyone has to agree. So I appreciate your comment, iPhone. I didn't say your name because I wasn't sure if you wanted me to. All right. Okay, let me read the story, and then we'll be wrapping it up pretty soon. Thank you to everybody who's here. So just a reminder that the book is available on August 12th, 2024. So if you're watching this at a later date, it's already available. It's on Amazon, paperback, and Kindle. And you can actually pre-order the Kindle already. So if you're like, I want to get this, if you pre-order the Kindle, like right now, it'll automatically be sent to your device on August 12th. And then the audiobook will come later. That's a But that's another project. And it's quite an expensive ordeal to pay to have an audiobook done. It's usually about $1,000. So I'm hoping to have that done next year. So we'll have that done as soon as we can. So remember, this is a more minor story, and I chose this one to illustrate how there are so many things that happen with our practitioners that are actually abusive, but because they're normalized, we're not really sure if it's abuse or not. This story is called The New Age Mental Health Therapist. I have always been a big proponent of therapy for those trying to heal after traumatic events. A few years ago, I sought out a mental health specialist who could support me in processing symptoms of PTSD. I chose Dr. Linda because she was well regarded and popular among my local New Age community, which I felt indicated she would be open-minded about some of the anomalous spiritual trauma I had experienced throughout my life. Unfortunately, I found out the hard way that this open-mindedness was also paired with the poor spiritual boundaries that are so common in today's New Age culture. Because Dr. Linda was a licensed therapist, I made the assumption that our appointments would be much like the other mental health therapy sessions I had been to over the years. So naturally, I was taken off guard when halfway through our session, she began channeling spiritual messages for me while sitting in a lotus position in her chair. She said that her beloved deceased aunt would often share messages for clients from the afterlife. As a lifelong clairvoyant myself, I took one look at the dark entity standing behind Dr. Linda and thought to myself, that is definitely not her aunt. By this point in my life, I was already quite familiar with what I call false light entities, negative entities posing as benevolent beings of light. In fact, part of the trauma I needed to talk out in therapy was the fact that I was able to see through the facade of these false light entities, while so many of my colleagues were being duped. So as you can imagine, when Dr. Linda started channeling this fraudulent spirit, it was quite triggering for me. I knew I would not be able to get much out of our talk therapy sessions if she kept doing this. So at the start of our second session, I asked her if she could refrain from channeling so we could focus on simple therapy. Sure, no problem, she smiled and reassured me. But you can guess what happens. And yet, 30 minutes later, she started channeling that fake entity again. It seemed that she was not able to control the channeling after all. I felt deflated as I realized that this therapist was not a good fit for me. At the end of the session, we both stood up and she asked if she could give me a hug. I was happy that she was asking permission because consent is very important to me. I said yes to what I thought was going to be a simple hug. After a couple of seconds, I was ready for the hug to end, so I tried to step backward out of the embrace. When I did this, she wrapped her arms around me even tighter as she took an audible, long, erotic sigh. As she did this, her chest expanded with her breath, and I suddenly realized that she was attempting to hook our heart chakras together. Why? Perhaps because she wanted me to be dependent on her and keep coming back for more sessions. No, thanks. I never went back, and yet so many others in my community raved about her. I felt that any complaints I might make would fall upon deaf ears. So remember that's a story that's very mild on the spectrum, where somebody was trying to plug in energetically in order to do something. I have other stories that are a lot more severe of situations that people have gone through with dark shamans. I've got a mixture of my own stories and things that have happened to other people. So let me know real quick if you have any questions, because we're gonna wrap it up here in just a second. So just to let you know, so the dark side of spiritual healers. Today, we went over part of what the book teaches, the 3 types of abusive spiritual teachers and healers. But there's a lot more that we cover in the book. And there is also a section at the end that gives advice on how to get out of these situations if you're already in it. So if you're watching this and you're like, oh my God, face palm. I'm now realizing that I'm in the thick of, like, I'm hooked in really bad, whether it's an mental emotional abuser, sexual predator, or a dark healer. You're realizing, oh my God, I did not realize that I was in this, and now the light bulb has gone off. How do I get out of this? I give some really helpful advice at the end of the book. And I also talk about, in the book, I talk about not just individual healers, which is mostly what we've talked about today, but also about the larger picture of spiritual events, all of the different issues with spiritual events. So just a quick announcement before I read your comments, and then we wrap it up for today. Our next free class next month, September, will be after the book has launched. And our next free class is a book launch party, basically. It's a book launch party where I'm going to get on Zoom with you at this same link. And I'm going to talk about and read certain sections of the book. Not just the 3 types of abusers, but I'm going to go through different sections of the whole book, read different sections, different snippets. And by that time, you will have already gotten your copy of the book. And so there'll be a lot of opportunity to ask questions, ask the author anything. You're going to ask me anything about the book or about the writing process or anything. So it's going to be a book launch party. Hopefully allergy season will be over by then. Let me read your comments and then we will wrap it up. Okay. Anon says, wow, great class on discernment. Can't wait for the book. Yeah, I really feel like this book is needed in the world. There are so many people who have ended up in negative situations simply because they didn't know better. Because one of the things I talk about in the book is the fact that spiritual communities really promote a lack of discernment and a lack of boundaries. Not to throw the whole spiritual movement under the bus, but there is a big problem with this. And so when someone is new to the spiritual communities, and they see that everyone is acting this certain way where there's no boundaries, there's no discernment, it's like the prime environment where it's like a heyday for abusers, like abusers gone wild. They can just like do whatever they want. Predators gone wild. And so if more people can have this book in their hands, the better, because then they already have this knowledge in their head when these predators, these different kinds of predators start to do their little things that they do, your red flags your little alarms are going to be going off. You're like, oh, I already know that that's not okay, right? So I'm hoping that people will read this book and either hand their book off to their friend or get their friend a copy, because the more people that know about this information, the better. Because let's face it, the spiritual predators are not upholding aspects of integrity. They are not upholding professional integrity. Okay. The predators are not upholding professional integrity. So it is up to the clients, students, followers to know what's what so you can protect yourself. And iPhone says, thanks, Maya. I'm ready for the book too. Thank you, everybody, for being here live. I truly appreciate each one of you. And also sending a shout out to all of my YouTube channel and everywhere else where you might be watching this. You can get a copy of this book on Amazon before we wrap up. Again, once again, the book is The Dark Side of Spiritual Healers, Teachers, and Light Workers. Thank you all so much for being here. And I look forward to seeing you in next month's class when we have our book launch party on Zoom. Thanks so much. Sending you all my love.